What's up, motherfuckers? After a victory in the previous Blitz game, Artemiev have 1 point ahead of Maxime Bacher-Lagrave. So in this game, he only needs a draw to advance to the next round. So let's analyze the game. Artemiev goes with the white pieces, and he selects the move d4. This game was played in a time counter of 5 minutes and 3 seconds. d4 by Artemiev, knight f6, knight f3, e6, c4, and b6. Maxime selects the Queen's Indian. G3 and now bishop a6. The idea of bishop a6 is provoke a bad black move because of course looks like the natural square for the bishop is b7. But the idea of bishop a6 is that every move that white made here doesn't benefit white so much because for example if you defend the pawn with the knight, like Artemiev made, this knight goes bad on d2, the knight with the square was c3. If you play b3 the same, this is a bad square for the bishop. Or queen c2 and queen 24 jugar the other natural moves. In other in solve the black, white response, black have some benefit of have the bishop on e6. So now for that reason he played bishop e6 to provoke a bad white move, knight d2, and now we see that he played bishop b7 in 2 tempos. But this is because the knight is bad placed on d2. That's why he played bishop e6 and later bishop b7. Bishop d2, c5, very aggressive move. The problem of c5 is that here we have the option of e4. It's interesting pawn sacrifice. So you cannot take on e4 because knight a5 here, and if you take on d4, here simply just long short castle and knight takes d4, and white is better in this pawn structure with the Maroczy ring. So short castle, bishop b7, and now e4 was stronger because okay, in the previous move was the best move, but okay after take on d4 and d6 black position is playable. It's not the best, but it's a playable position. But e4 in this exactly moment have the huge problem of that now you cannot just take on d4 because now white can play e5 very strong. Knight g8 and okay just take here and this position is winning of course because the knight is on g8. And if you take on e4 the same that before, 95. That's the problem. The pin in this long diagonal. So here if could be, yes, I'm not going to say completely winning, but yes, will give a huge advantage to Artemiev. So he missed this tactic and he still developing his pieces with b3, bishop b2. Now both players start to play more or less normal. For example, e3, both players start to make normal move. Rook c8, queen e2, and d5, very good move. Just to break the center and all the control of the space. Rook c1, Artemiev is still placing well the pieces. Pawn takes, knight takes, knight c5. Both players are just improving their pieces. Rook in the center, rook in the center, knight b5. Now Artemiev transposed his knight from d4 to c3 to put pressure into the d5 pawn. Very interesting plan. Now the knight, okay, on d4 looks good, but it's not attacking nothing. But now the knight on c3 at least is putting pressure into the d5 pawn. Queen d7, and now he take a knight f3. Again, very good idea of Artemiev. Now the d5 pawn is, yes, it's isolated and it's a little bit weak, and apart white have a strong square on d4. His bishop are so well placed, so I really like white position now. a5 of Maxime trying to make something with a4. Bishop f1 and h5. He's trying to take space with the rook pawns. Knight d4, bishop a6 to trade his bad bishop. A very good idea, of course. The problem is that the latest square bishop is defending the d5 pawn. Okay, can look like the b7 bishop is a bad bishop, but at least it's defending the d5 pawn. In the future, it's going to be weak. Bishop a6, bishop takes, and g6. Okay, you trade your latest square bishop. So now we're going to place the pawns in light squares to cover light squares, and the other bishop cover the dark squares. Knight d2, knight d4, knight takes, d takes. Very good because now finally black managed to, yes, to place his isolate pawn at least on d4. This pawn structure is still being a little bit better for white, but I prefer this pawn structure than the other for black. I prefer to, if you can pass your isolate d pawn to e4, it's to be fine. But now the problem is that after rook d7, rook c1, knight c1, he takes here. White have this tactic. Okay, maybe the tactic is easy. I suppose that Artemiev saw the tactic, but maybe he evaluates incorrect the position, or I don't know. But he can take the bishop with rook e7, and now white have two pieces for the rook. The problem for white is that the f3 pawn is so annoying for the white king. And okay, the rook is going to activate, and maybe with the help of the pawn can put white in some trouble. So I understand the Artemiev, yes, what Artemiev do without take there. Because okay, like I remind us that I remind you that that Artemiev only needs the draw to advance to the next round. So for Artemiev was the same to win a victory than a lose. But here with Rook e3, I suppose that he's closer. Sorry, it's the same the victory than the draw. But I think that Artemiev here is closer to the draw. But okay, of course, it's not easy to evaluate this endgame, especially in a blitz control. But we saw that we're going to see that White is not going to have problems with the f3 pawn. Because knight d3, rook c2, and now king e1. Just okay, we should give the a2 pawn. But okay, now the rook is a little bit trapped on a2. And so he finally he should trade the a pawn for the b pawn, and after 95 look like white is not going to have so much troubles to at least draw this position. But okay, Artemiev instead of that he just tried to go for a safer position, I suppose, but who is equal. Rook c king e1, rook c8, king d1, b5. Okay, here is slightly better, but okay, h4 is normal, a4. Yeah, Maxim is trying to take a space with the queenside pawns, bishop c3. But the same game I think that could be a little bit more pleasant for black because the f3 pawn is so annoying, and yes, the black rook can be activated. Black have more space with the pawns. e4, rook a5, king g7. And here, Artemiev just should, yes, wait and move the rook in the a file. It's important that the black rook, okay, doesn't enter in the a file, but um, yes, if not, black cannot make so much progress because with black to put trouble, you should enter in some file with the rook. But the a file is occupied for the white rook. The b file is closed by the pawns. The c file is closed by his own bishop, but you have no entries because c1 and sorry c2, c1 are covered by the king. And the d file, okay, is closed by the knight. So okay, I still thinking that black is putting black is yes the guy who is pressing, but Nassim should just be yes be in his yes not move nothing, just play rook a7 or rook a4, rook a6, something like that in the e5, not avoid counterplay. The problem of e4 is that now the rook have some objectives and some goals to attack. Now rook d8 and rook d4, and the e4 pawn is under attack. That's why I don't like the move e4 because you give an extra, yes, you create an extra weakness in your own position. e5, rook e4, and okay, you manage to defend the pawn, but now um, finally the rook find a yes a way to enter in the white position. Like I told, it looks like okay, black could be putting pressure, but if the rook cannot enter in white position, the position is going to be a draw. But finally, the black rook managed to enter. And now white still can defend the position or with king c1 or with rook d5. But okay, the position is not easy, of course. So he tries to activate the rook, but this doesn't work. So could be stronger, just defend the knight and try to be in this position. But he tried to activate the rook, but this is not going to work. Because okay, here black just take the pawn, and now black have an extra pawn and more space with the pawns because the b4 pawn is so advanced. Especially the f3 pawn is so annoying. I'm talking so much about the f3 pawn, but this is because this is a so annoying pawn. The f3 pawn. So rook a2. Now check. Now the rook endgame, the king's endgame was completely winning, just going with the king to g2. This the pawn is closer. And okay, if here white, okay, white cannot try to defend, of course, but okay, if you try to defend something, black have like infinite extra tempos. So I say whatever you want. So this could win the game so easy. But okay, the rook singing I prefer, I think that the king singing here was easier. But okay, he goes for he still prefer the rook hanging, who is completely winning, of course. A black have three extra pawn, but okay, at least white managed to place a pawn in the second rank. But it's just winning for black. So but Maxim won in a very good way, and he managed to draw to tie the match. Now I want to change the result 1 second. Now the result is 4-4. Now after the game, the matching the sorry the match stay still tight, and so the next game are going to be 3 games or of 3 minutes and 2 seconds per move. I'm going to analyze the games on the channel, so let's see the games. Bye bye, motherfuckers.